Hello, and I'm back. Welcome back to the Gardner Show.
The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show. The Gardner Show.
I'm your host, M. Gardner. I'm a novelist, lifelong lover of stories. Whether you're new here, or you've been with me since episode 1, welcome back to the campfire. Just so you know, I was away for some mental health issues, but I am back now, and I am strong, and hopefully for a long, long time. Now, behind every great story is a deeper question, and today's question is one that I've been thinking about for a long time, like I normally do. Why do we love the hero's journey so much? So, pull up a chair, and let's begin at the very beginning. Let's start with a simpler question. Actually, what is the hero's journey? One of the clearest, most famous examples is The Lord of the Rings, particularly the story of Frodo Baggins. The hero's journey, as laid out by Joseph Campbell in his landmark 1949 book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is fantastic if you haven't read it, it generally follows a recognizable set of stages. Later writers, especially screenwriters and story consultant Christopher Vogel, in the book The Writer's Journey, distilled Campbell's academic framework into a version specifically built for working with writers and filmmakers, which is the shape most of us recognize today. Here's how it plays out in Frodo's story. Ordinary world, Frodo lives quiet, happy life in the Shire. A call to adventure. He learns about the One Ring, the danger it poses. He refuses the call. He is frightened he's frightened. He refuses. He meets his mentor. Gandalf guides him. Crossing the threshold, Frodo leaves the Shire. Tests allies and enemies. He meets Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Sam, and faces dangers after dangers. He is approached in an innermost cave, the long, grim journey towards Mordor, the ordeal, which is the struggle against the ring's corruption, and the reward, the ring reaches the Mount Doom, and the road back, he returns home, resurrection, Frodo fundamentally changed by his experiments. It is the return with the elixir, which means the world is saved, though Frodo can never fully return to who he was before. You'll find versions of this structure everywhere: Harry Potter, The Matrix, Odyssey, and perhaps the clearest, most deliberate modern examples are Star Wars with Luke Skywalker. You guys know how I love Star Wars. Luke Skywalker's story particularly highlights each stage, which grants flashing signs that says, here it is. But what is remarkable is not how common this structure is in modern entertainment. What is remarkable is how ancient it is and how universal it is. One of Joseph Campbell's most important observations was that this pattern, the basic shape, appears across cultures, across centuries, across thousands of miles, thousands of years, and with no possibility of direct contact or influence. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we've talked about before, one of the oldest written stories we have follow the hero's journey. Gilgamesh begins as an arrogant king. He faces challenges, his friendships and deaths to Enkidu, embarks on a quest of immortality. He faces ordeals. He meets a mentor figure. He undergoes a reconstruction of sorts, not literally coming back from the dead, but returning fundamentally transformed in his understanding of mortality. The Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, which scholars may be among the oldest communicated, transmitted stories in human history, with an oral tradition extending back 40,000 years or more, follow a similar pattern. A hero is called to the land itself to journey. They face trials. They are transformed. They return to established laws, peace names, and spiritual knowledge for their people. In Hindu mythology, the story of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita follows the shape of Arjuna, who is called to battle with Krishna, and he doesn't want to fight. He refuses. He meets the mentor Krishna, as mentioned. He crosses the threshold into battle. He faces the ordeal. He is transformed, and he undergoes Dharma, his purpose. In Norse mythology, Odin's journey to gain knowledge and power of the runes involved sacrifice, ordeal, a transformation. He hangs himself in the world tree 9 nights. He is wounded, he is changed, and he returns with knowledge that benefits his people. Campbell's point to all of this, and I think is generally profound one, is that this pattern appears because it describes something fundamental about human beings are transformed. It's not that the cultures copied each other. It's that they independently recognize that some deep patterns in how we change actually happens in human life. Anthropologist Victor Turner called this the liminal space, a threshold between who you are and where you are becoming. You might think of liminal spaces like the popular movie Backrooms that just came out. That's a liminal space. It's a place in between. So Turner observed that the ritual ceremonies across widely different cultures, there was always a moment of luminality, a space where normal rules did not apply, where the intent, neither who they were nor who they were becoming, was where the transformation actually occurs. This is the ordeal in any hero's journey that is the luminal space. And because human psychology is fundamentally similar across cultures, we all have brains, we all have bodies, we all have emotions, we all have the capability and capacity for growth and change. We all recognize that this pattern is true. I think we love the hero's journey because it rings true at the deepest level of human experience. Most people begin as ordinary. Luke was a moisture farmer. Harry was an orphan stuffed in a cupboard underneath someone's stairs. Neo was just some guy working his job that he didn't particularly love. Then life interrupts. Challenges appeared, a loss, an opportunity, an illness, a relationship, a career change, a crisis. We struggle, we fail, we learn, we grow. And eventually, if we were fortunate, we became someone different from who we started. That's not just plot template, that's the actual shape of being alive. Nobody's life follows a flat line. We all get our call to adventure eventually, whether we are asked for it or not. And most of us, if we are honest, spend a little while in the refusal of the call before we cross that threshold. The hero's journey is compelling because it legitimizes the difficulty of being alive. It suggests that the struggle isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong, nor is it a departure from your real life. It is the actual shape of living. I think another reason we are drawn to these stories is that it gives a meaning to suffering. If suffering serves a purpose, then maybe it isn't meaningless. Maybe the difficult thing we are going through isn't just random pain. Maybe it's shaping us into something stronger, which is something I learned so much over the past month. Stories can't remove suffering. They cannot. But they can help us endure it. They remind us that hardship is often the path, not evidence that we have lost our way. This is something comforting for us. It is a comforting feeling without any backing either. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and later wrote Man's Search for Meaning, has argued from direct experience that human beings can endure almost unimaginable suffering if they can locate meaning within it. He observes that those who could frame their suffering as a part of a larger purpose, even an unfinished or uncertain one, they will most likely survive it intact than those who could not. Frankl's observation is psychological, but it is also deeply mythological. He's describing people living out the hero's journey in real time. The ordeal, in his case the Holocaust, becomes bearable if you can understand it as a larger transformation, a larger calling. Frankl documented the prisoners who could maintain sense of purpose, whether they had a future project they wanted to complete, a love that they needed to survive to see again, or even a spiritual or philosophical understanding that they were trying to live out, were significantly more likely to survive the camps. Those who did not have a story, who could not locate their suffering in a larger narratives, were far less likely to lose will to continue, which is horrible and tragic. That's the hero's journey, however, functioning as a lived psychological function rather than fiction. This ordeal isn't an obstacle blocking the story. The ordeal is the story, and so it is often with us. The transformation that comes from enduring difficulty, that's what the hero's journey promises, and psychologically, we desperately need that promise. Courage is another reason we are drawn to these stories. Think about it. What story do you remember more? The story of a man who was burning a building who saved his daughter, 3 cats, the dog, or the story of the neighbor who stood outside cheering him on? The neighbor may have spent more time in front of the camera, but that's not the story we remember. We remember the person who stepped into the flames. We admire the courage because courage is the transformation in ordinary people into hero. It is not the strength that makes a hero in most of these stories. Frodo is by every physical measure one of the weakest characters in The Lord of the Rings. It's the willingness to keep walking towards Mordor. There is something in human psychology that deeply responds to the sight of someone choosing to do something difficult, choosing to face their fear, choosing to continue even when they could stop. In evolutionary terms, research like David Buss have argued that humans are drawn towards displays of courage because courage signals something valuable. The willingness to face danger for the benefit of others, the strength of character to endure hardship, the capacity to handle crisis, where we're attracted to it. We remember it, we tell stories about it. As a writer, I think there is one reason the structure keeps appearing across cultures and across thousands of years of storytelling, and it isn't just formula. It's a reflection of how people actually understand their own lives, and the kind of person they hope that they'd be for a moment, if ever called to it. Now, I want to talk about something deeper in the hero's journey that doesn't always get discussed. Carl Jung, a psychiatrist I've mentioned before, has spent his career thinking about what's called the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've rejected and denied and hidden away. It's not necessarily evil, but it is everything that doesn't fit your self-image. And Jung argued that the genuine transformation, genuine growth, requires integrity of the shadow. You have to look at the parts of yourself you don't want to look at and accept them as parts of the whole picture. In the hero's journey, this often happens in the ordeal. The hero doesn't face an external enemy. They face something that mirrors something of themselves. Luke Skywalker's ordeal isn't just fighting the Empire. It's confronting Darth Vader. He is discovering that Vader is his father, spoilers, and that it carries the potential for Vader's darkness within himself. Frodo's ordeal isn't just fighting Sauron. It is carrying the ring. It is literally carrying the corrupting influence, the temptation, the power, all the way to Mount Doom. The internal ordeal is this. Can I face my darkness within yourself and not be consumed by it? I am telling you, this episode is like for me, because of what I've been going through. Can I face the darkness within me? This is 100% what I've been facing the past month. That's why the ordeal is so important. That's why it can't be a simple obstacle the hero just has to come through. It is the strength or cleverness. The ordeal has to touch something real about who the hero is, something they're afraid of, something they've been running from, something they don't want to acknowledge. And that transformation happens when you face it anyway. Psychologically, this maps out onto what therapists call integration. The process of knowing disowned parts of yourself and bringing them into a more complete self-understanding. It's uncomfortable, but it is necessary, and it leads to genuine growth. That's why when we feel a story does this well, we recognize it. We've done it. We know it, we need it, or we are afraid that we can't do it. Not every story that follows the hero's journey structure is a good story. Some of them fall flat, and I think it's useful to understand why. The most common failure point from my observation is that the hero's journey doesn't actually change. The hero doesn't actually change. They go through the motions, they face the ordeal, the external obstacle is overcome, but they step back into their ordinary world exactly the same person when they were left behind. That's not the hero's journey, that's just a series of events. The real hero's journey requires genuine transformation. The hero has to be fundamentally different in the end. They've learned something they can't unlearn. They've become someone they can't uncreate. Another failure point is the ordeal doesn't actually cost them anything. If the hero faces danger, but they're never at any real risk, if they believe they might actually fail, then the ordeal loses its power. Its stakes were flattened, and we stopped caring. The stories that stick with us are the ones where the ordeal is genuinely threatening, where the hero might not come back, where they might lose something irreplaceable in the process. There's also the failure to return. Some stories handle the hero's journey well, but the way they get through the ordeal, but then they fail to properly integrate the return. The hero comes home, but then the story doesn't sit with what it means for them to be changed in that world, and the world itself hasn't changed. The dissonance, the hero transformed, but the world is static, is actually really powerful if you let it sit. But then, if you rush it and you don't acknowledge it, you lose a crucial part of what the journey meant. The best hero's journey doesn't let you off easy in the end. They force you to sit with the cost of transformation. I just want to talk about the hero's journey functions in modern storytelling, particularly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which, we all like MCU, right? Because I think it's a very useful example of how the archetype adapts to new formats. The MCU doesn't invent transmedia storytelling, but it is the clearest, most current example of how the hero's journey, remember transmedia storytelling, we talked about that earlier. This is the clearest example of how a singles hero journey can unfold across multiple films, television series, and storylines over more than a decade. Tony Stark's arc across the Iron Man films and Avenger films is a classic hero's journey, but structured across more than a decade of storytelling and across films directed by different people with different sensibilities. He's got an ordinary world. Tony's weapons manufacturer. He's a brilliant, arrogant, morally unmoored. He's got the call to adventure. He's captured and sees the weapons he's creating being used against the innocents. He's got the refusal. He initially just tries to build a bigger weapon, stronger armor. He meets his mentor, various figures, Pepper, Captain America, eventually the other Avengers, and they push him towards growth. Crossing the threshold, he becomes Iron Man. Tests allies and enemies. The entire run of the MCU repeatedly. The ordeal, multiple moments, the Battle of New York, the revelation of what his weapons have caused, the confrontation with Thanos, that ultimately sacrifices him in the endgame. Spoilers, I know, but if you haven't seen it yet, that film's like 10 years old. The return, he doesn't get the return. He is transformed in the end by death. He sacrifices himself for the world. What is interesting about this is that there is no traditional return with the elixir. Stark is the elixir. His sacrifice saves the world, but doesn't get to return to enjoy it. The transformation is complete. There is no going back. And that's actually quite powerful and honors the cost of transformation. The MCU essentially takes Campbell's ancient structure and structured it across multiple films and multiple decades of storytelling, but the core pattern remains the same. What this tells us is that the hero's journey isn't a rigid formula, but it is flexible. It adapts, but it has the basic shapes. Ordinary person, call to trial, ordeals, transformation, that remains consistent because the psychology is true. Here's the part of this that gets overlooked. Readers aren't just watching an adventure unfold from the outside. They're imagining it themselves inside that adventure. They are experiencing the journey through the character's eyes, one decision at a time. The research in cognitive psychology around this is the concept of narrative transportation. It's studied extensively by researchers like Melania Green and Timothy Brock, which describe the way that we are absorbed as readers in mental and emotional state actually shifts with the world as they are reading the story. Their attention narrows, their sense of their own surroundings fades, in a very real, measurable sense. Part of them is temporarily becomes the person whose shoes they are standing in. But it goes deeper than that. Brain imaging studies show that when you are reading a story, not only do your language processing regions activate, the process of your brain that decodes words, but so do the sensory and motor cortexes corresponding to the action described. If the character is running, your motor cortex activates. If they're smelling something, your olfactory cortex activates. You are running. You are smelling what they're smelling. You're not just processing information. Your brain is simulating the experience. That's not a metaphor. That's documented neuroscience. That's where the actual magic of the hero journeys happens. Not on the page, but in the transfer. As a writer, what we are really trying to do is invite you into someone else's life for just a little while, to let you step into their shoes, to let you have their own worries behind for 20 minutes, an hour, or maybe even an entire evening. And if we structure that invitation into using the ancient shape of the hero's journey, a shape that takes your brain and recognizes it at a deep level because it maps onto how human transformation actually works, then something profound happens. You don't just experience the story, you experience your own capability for transformation. You feel what it's like to be called to something different. You feel the weight of the ordeal, and you imagine what could be like to come out the other side change. That is the gift of the hero's journey. That is why we keep coming back to it. There's something genuinely beautiful about that. A reader hands a writer their attention. The actual lived time, which is only true in narrable resources, that their actual lived time, which is the only truly non-renewable resource any of us has, and trust the writer to do something worthwhile with it. Okay, Writer's Corner. Yay. This week, I want to talk about how the hero's journey actually shows up in my own work. Because once you start looking at the pattern, you can't just stop seeing it in your own writing. Every story I've written contains some version of the hero's journey. Bear, which I am currently rewriting into shorter novels rather than just a grand 300,000 piece novel. It's going to be shorter, 90,000 word novels. Anrith, which is Bear, El in the Epic of El, and Hoyt in The Last Exorcist, which is now Gods, Aliens, and Onion Rings. Each one begins with a person who faces a trial that they didn't ask for and becomes something entirely new by the end of it. I didn't consistently sit down with Campbell, 12 stages, and typed my metaphor for these books. The structure just kept showing up because I think it's generally how most people instinctively understand a satisfying story arc, even before we've ever heard the term monomyth. But what I've learned through revision is that the power of the hero's journey isn't hitting all 12 stages, it's honoring the cost of each stage. In Anrith, Bear's transformation isn't clean. He doesn't return home to the same person. The world doesn't return to entirely accept who he's become. There is dissonance. And that transformation of the hero is an unchanged world. It's actually where the real story lives. That's where the depth is. Gods, Aliens, and Onion Rings, the ordeal doesn't just defeat the enemy. It breaks the understanding of what he's been fighting his entire life. His transformation is painful because it's just victory. It's deconstruction of his worldview. That's what it is. That's what separates a hero's journey that rings true from one that just feels generic. The ordeal matters. The transformation, the cost of something that the hero can just dust themselves off and return to business as usual. To the 40 people that bought my first novel, and I mean this sincerely, 40 real people made a real decision to spend their real money and real hours on something I made. I hope I gave you a journey worth taking. To the people I gave the novel to for free, I hope I gave you a journey worth taking. The Epic of El Book 1 is 256 pages. For the average reader, that's somewhere around 6 or 7 hours of reading. And honestly, I hope 6 or 7 hours mattered. I hope that for a little while, you forgot your bills, you forgot your stress, you forgot your loneliness, your worries, or whatever burden you happened to be carrying this week. I hope you got to be somewhere else, and maybe, just maybe, you could come back from that journey and something you didn't have when you started. That's the whole point. That's the writing. That's the whole point. And just going off script here for a minute, I did publish another book on Kindle KDP, so you can look me up, M. Gardner. It's called Resurrection Protocol. It's about zombies, alien zombies. And hopefully I've got one person who's bought that already, who's already read it, contacted me. I hope I took you into that world and you left your problems for just, 156 pages. That's, 5 hours of reading time. I hope you got something out of that. Now, the writing challenge for this week, if you're working on something, is to look at your protagonist's ordeal and the lowest, hardest point of your story. Ask yourself honestly, does this moment change them? Or does it just happen around them? The hero's journey isn't about the events. It's about those events that cost the person living through them and what is left over afterwards. If your character walks out at the hardest moment of the same person they're going into it, that's worth a second look. Ask yourself, what do you lose in this ordeal? Not physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. What belief about themselves or the world gets shattered? And then, what do you have to do to rebuild from the ashes? That's where the transformation lives. Write that this week. So like I said, I've got a second book out. It's just on Kindle. You can buy a paperback. You can buy it on Kindle, just Amazon, paperback, Kindle. It's called Resurrection Protocol. It's got, a janitor with a rainbow mushroom on the cover. M. Gardner is the name. 156 pages, easy read. It's meant for adults. It is not meant for children, if there's any children reading. So, meant for adults. And I would encourage you to go buy that. Look at that Epic of El if you're interested in my words. If this is connecting with you, then maybe my stories will connect with you. And truly, that's the power of stories. And that's the power of the hero's journey. It's a familiar, it's comforting, it's hopeful, and perhaps, and most importantly, it reminds us of transformation is possible. For heroes, for readers, and for us. Life is difficult. That's not being pessimistic. That's not a pessimistic statement. It's just fact. You face ordeals. You will be called to things you are not sure you can do. You will be changed by what you experience. The hero's journey whispers that to us, that this is not failure, that this is evidence that something is wrong with the world. This is the actual shape of being alive. And maybe, just maybe, the struggle is the point. I hope my story this week didn't bore you. If you have any questions, please email me at mgardnerbooks@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for pulling up a chair around my campfire. Please keep questioning, keep telling stories, and keep creating. And I'll see you next time on the M. Gardner Show.